So I want to introduce Thomas. The talk is by Thomas Price and Ross Moore, and they're going to talk about doing more of that with TKZ on top. So please have the podium.
Well, thank you. I'm trying to get the right screen up here, so.
Take your time.
Okay, thank you. This, you should be seeing the same slides that you saw in the test. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The large slide, okay. Well, my name is Tom Price. It's a beautiful night here in Akron, Ohio, USA. I hope you all are having a beautiful whatever it is, wherever you are as well. This talk is going to consist of two presentations. I will begin by describing a bundle of files designed to build accessible center reference documents. I call those CRDs, using the pdfLaTeX engine. Ross will follow, and he's going to talk about tagging TXI images. Of course, the way I do this is with Ross's pdfx package and his tpdf package. The slide on the screen right now is, of course, the title page for this talk, but it's designed to look very much like a title page for CRD. The CRDs have footnotes for each author, and these footnotes give the affiliations in a certain location, and in fact they're typeset inside a mini page, and this is for accessibility purposes. CRDs have a second page called the cover page, which also contains an author list. This page does not have the author affiliations. I'll be talking about the code I use to generate these two pages, and you'll see how I used the author information twice. It was very simple, but I did have to access it twice. When I was working on this bundle, I had three goals in mind, actually more, but I wanted to talk about three of them. The first goal was to build a PDF UA accessible CRD, but it also had to satisfy national, NOAA publications guidelines. These two requirements must work together. You have to establish the LaTeX code that will build a document according to NOAA publication protocol, as well as build it so the macros can communicate with the tpdf package for proper tagging. And so those were the two goals that I had for that first one. The second one was to minimize the author input required to build accessible documents. In other words, I wanted to keep this very simple for the authors. Ross just pointed out how if you make a mistake, it can pollute the tagging, and so I want to have a few possible mistakes that can be made when the authors start typing this up. Third goal was to eliminate post-processing accessibility requirements. Right now, the NOAA people have to take their PDF file and work on it inside something like the Adobe Acrobat program to make it accessible. I'd like to eliminate all that. That's very, very time consuming. This is the basic workflow of the bundle. First of all, we have the main.tex file, which is really your document file. This, the three dots indicate other files that you may bring in, like images and so on. The authors don't really start with a blank page. I provide a template in the bundle that contains almost all the code they need to mark up a document to be typeset as an accessible document. There are rules, there are exceptions to that. For example, the authors are going to have to tag images with little pop-ups, but that's handled very easily with a command that Ross has in his package. They have to identify header cells for tabular data. That is not very difficult. And so basically, most of the commands that they'll be using are CRD commands for center reference documents. You'll notice here that I have on the right column Ross's two packages. The first one handles all metadata and color. We'll see how the metadata is handled in just a minute. The color profile, there's a default color profile. I have never looked at any other, and I don't know of anyone who has, so I'm not going to discuss that. The second file, or style file, is for tagging. This handles all tagging issues. If you use these two files correctly, you will get an accessible PDF UA document. Okay, so the preamble is a file that the main file imports. I mentioned that I wanted to keep things simple for the authors, so most of the preamble material for these files is contained in this preamble document. The preamble in the main.text file contains, for the most part, only commands that the authors have to populate or commands where they have to make a decision. We'll look at examples of some of these files in each of these bundle files, some of these code files in each of the bundles. The next one, the structure and tagging file, or the macros file, handles all tagging issues. And it does so by keeping the document so that it doesn't mess up the typesetting protocol requirements that we have for these types of documents. So these things have to be written to handle special typesetting specifications in such a way that they honor the typesetting specifications, but at the same time, they can communicate with Ross's tpdf style file and use it effectively. Now, when I say communicate, that's exactly what I mean, because in order to do that, this package or these commands and this style file speak a different language. And so we have a tpdf to CRD translator. You'll see an example of that, but basically this takes all the commands in here and translates it to the commands that this package can understand. There are good reasons why you would do this. It may seem, well, why don't you just write the commands in here so that they would communicate? I think you'll see why as we go along. This is an example of the markup in the template that the main file inherits when you build it from the template. This is it for the metadata requirements. Authors just populate these metadata commands. I put 5 here. You can remove any you want, and you can add as many as you want. In the package pdfx, there were so many of these that are available to you that I did not want to count them, and I think I can say that no one will ever need one that they don't have. This is the author information block of commands, and here the authors populate these commands with their names and a footnote that has in it the affiliation, their affiliations. And you'll notice that these are all inside this cut command. This cut is just like a Windows cut. I just cut them right out of the main document so that I can paste them anywhere I want. By the way, I mentioned that the affiliations are handled by footnotes. Those footnotes do not in any way interact with document footnotes. So the numbering is completely separate. There's no overlap or anything like that. This is an example of a CRD preamble, of command in the CRD preamble. This is the one that Ross has already discussed. If I had known you were going to do that, Ross, I would have done another one. There are several commands that I have that are switches. One is which bibliography system to use. Remember that I'm writing a template for people to write CRDs, and I wanted to provide them with everything they need. And one thing is I wanted to give them a bibliography management system. And I chose for pdfLaTeX. They can turn that off. The default is pdfLaTeX, but they can turn that off and use any system they want. They have to enter the code themselves for that system. Ross has described how this works. One main purpose of this, I don't think Ross mentioned this, is that you're able to compare your final untagged PDF with your tagged PDF. Okay, in the CRD macros file, I have an environment called CRD Authors. This basically formats the authors for the cover page. Remember that the cover page is the one that does not contain author affiliations. First, if you look at line 5, see that paste command? That paste command just pastes the author list, that, the information that the author's filled out, those fields they populated right here. Excuse me. There's also another environment, almost exactly like this one, that does not eliminate the footnotes. This one does, however, here in lines 9 and 10. And you can see they do that. Okay, now this is a sample from the tpdf, the CRD translator, or vice versa. I didn't put much in here. A lot of stuff goes in for one of these document blocks or command blocks. But basically what's going on, you can see this. First of all, well, let me tell you what the CRD Site As command is. It has nothing to do with citations in the document body. The tagging for that is done automatically. That's not an issue, at least not that I'm aware of. But the CRDs contain another page besides the cover and title page, which we call the series page. And that page lists all the different series that NOAA publishes. At the very bottom of that, they put something like a bibliography piece of information, a reference piece of information that is basically the information dealing with the current file. And that's why I guess they called it Site As, and I just modify it to CRD Site As. And you notice the first thing that's done here is that we define this new command to be the Site As command. And then all this stuff that goes on in here equips this command to tag this command, basically. And at the same time, then at the very end during the build process, typeset this reference type information that I described. Several observations that I've made. In the CRD bundle manual, I gave authors several warnings encouraging them to avoid adding packages, changing packages, or defining new commands. Because if you do that, there's a very, very good chance you will pollute the tagging. The commands will need to be modified so that they can communicate with the TPDF file or style file, as well as we may need modifications to Ross's TPDF file to do that. So the preamble, that document preamble that I have, that CRD Preamble text file that actually imports all the preamble information to the document, contains a lot of packages because I tried to include every one that the authors of CRDs would need. I tried to use every one they would need because I wanted the manual to itself be a CRD. I wanted it to satisfy the typesetting specifications from NOAA, and I wanted it to also be a PDF UA compliant document. So I had to add the listings package. You know that because the document manual contains LaTeX listings such as the one that you have here. So this had to be dealt with for tagging. I also defined about 25 commands that look something like this. Now this command basically typesets this information that you see right here. That's all it does in the printed version. That's exactly what this innermost command over here does. List in line, if you're familiar with it, is part of the listings package. And this allows me to just typeset something right in line. That's what it means. But these things need to be tagged as well. And this is what Ross does here. He defined a CRD code file command. And that makes this tagging process much easier for all these many, many commands, and there may be more. I don't know. There were some surprises in this, as you can imagine. One thing that surprised me is that for some reason, the font used to typeset URLs was changed. I'm not sure what I did to do that, and actually, I didn't catch it. Ross caught it earlier this week. Now that was an easy fix. I just put this command right before the begin document command, and then that change didn't happen. But this was very strange because on my system, when I would build a document, I would get a different font than the one that Ross got. But all the other fonts were the same in the document, so I'm not real sure what's going on there. I think I'm saying that correctly. Ross, you can correct me after this if I'm wrong here, but I believe that's what you said in the letter, that we got different fonts.
Yeah.
Now, the tagging considerations improved the organization, the structure, and the quality of my LaTeX markup. It's just amazing how unforgiving tagging specifications can be. All the years I've used LaTeX, I never worried about warnings when I built a document. Now I'm a zero warning person. I'd really like to thank the TUG 20 conference committee for putting this conference together. It's my first TUG conference. I really enjoyed it. It's interesting to meet people that I've read about. It's interesting to see what all these people are doing. I'd also like to thank Ross Moore. I actually don't think I could find the words to express my gratitude for his help, because I used to say that I could not have done this without his assistance, but actually I could not have even begun it without his assistance. Thank you, Ross. Don Story is a former colleague and a current friend of mine who is a LaTeX developer. He has, I think, about 60 packages on CTAN now. I can't think of a single major project that I have done that he hasn't helped me with. And finally, I would like to thank NOAA, because they're helping me feed my family. I want to point out that I've mentioned 3 references here. All of these are worth looking at, in my opinion, and these slides are available for download, so you can pick up the references if you need them. I would like to especially point out this video. This was probably first real introduction that I had to building accessible documents. And it, in my opinion, is well worth watching if you're interested in this type of thing. Well, having said all of that, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate your attendance. And I think Ross is on now.
Yeah. Right. Well, thank Tom. Thanks very much for your kind words. And now I'm going to show you one of the curly balls that you threw at me. I'll show everyone one of the curly examples that he said, can you tag this, basically. So I'll go back to sharing the screen, and yeah, I think it better be the full desktop, because I still don't trust. Well, okay, so here we go. So I'm calling this tagging in TXI diagrams, but basically this was an example of a diagram that Tom sent me as I said, kind of, can you tag this? Will it work with this kind of stuff? And I had to sit down and scratch my head. Well, there's several examples here. So let's have a little look. This one's called a SWOT diagram, and right, so here you can see the SWOT and strength, weakness, opportunity, threat. Well, let's go to the actual diagram itself. Okay, so here it is as a single file by itself. And when you look at this, you can see that there's an awful lot of structure in there. So can we capture that structure? Well, let's just say, were we able to capture that structure? And the answer is, okay, the answer is indeed yes, we could. You can see all the purple boxes for the different text, right? So it's not just text horizontally, but text at different angles. Some of it vertical, some of it horizontal. There's a couple of boxes here which, okay, I can explain what they are or why they are, where I couldn't get it to rotate properly. It's meant to be rotated to vertical. Similarly, that one's meant to be, but it didn't actually happen. And so there is something there that needs to be looked at a bit further. But so what's the structure? The structure is that you've got these four groups, right? And then there's extra structure that I've put together as a group around the outside there. Okay, and each of these groups corresponds to, it has a title. Yeah, so it has an H1 title. So the S for the strength. It has a list of objects, and it has an H2 title for the strength. And that's the same in each of those four of them. Okay. And then the last group is for all the words around the outside. And the way I decided to set these up is that, okay, internal is somehow to do with strength and weakness internally, so I've made a hyperlink out of one of them, and that didn't seem to want to work. Okay, wait, maybe I need to make this thing a lot larger in order to make those hyperlinks actually work. Well, that was the intention anyway. Let's see if they work with any of the others. Got to get the mouse to work correctly now. Doesn't seem to want to do that. Anyway, okay, so the idea is that these are, okay, so these are meant to be hyperlinks that concentrate on just one or other of the four blocks, and it probably only will work when I've zoomed it out. So let's try that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay, so they do actually work. They do take you around. It's just very hard to know what's the right, what is the right thing to be looking at, and how to get the matching. But at least there are some hyperlinks there which do handle it. Okay. if you've got the full text, sorry, someone fix that up here. Okay. Okay, so we've got that kind of structure there, and that of course works for all of them, right? What's probably most interesting in here is how easy that was to achieve. So I want to go to the source for that, tpdftixi.tech. Let's move that out of the way. Okay, so most of this is Tixi code, and there's only a few extra bits that that were needed. Okay, we needed to have a start tagging in the document, so that's one extra bit that had to be put in. We've added in some extra environments that aren't directly in Tixi, but Tixi doesn't seem to mind that, which is great. So we put in an extra, each of these sections we've defined an environment. Okay, that environment does absolutely nothing except that it allows you to hook through to tagging. So where is it? There's a definition here somewhere for the Tixi environment. There should be a new environment command. Yeah, here we go. New environment Tixi sect does absolutely nothing. Tags one argument, does absolutely nothing. This is an example of what I was describing earlier as a semantic environment. The idea is what that is doing is that it's providing you with a link which you can hook to, or it's providing you with hooks that you can link to and attach the tagging to those hooks, right? Because the environment defines a command /tixi sect and /end tixi sect, and those then become hooks to which you can attach tagging. Okay, and so that gets done in an extra file. So I did that one. I can show you. It was here, tpdfTixi. Where is it? There it is, tpdfTixi.tech. Okay, so this is a module that gets pulled in for handling Tixi graphics. The moment it's only done with pdfTech. Okay, and so there's extra environments in here. Okay, so what the coding in here does is effectively give you extra hooks that you can link to. Right, here's where it creates the structure node, and it can create the structure node, and it can use extra text that's conveyed as if it was alternative text. We'll see that in the next example. But as far as the user coding is concerned, there's very little difference from just pure Tixi. Okay, there's a macro here called tag word. Okay, and that's used in a couple of places inside the node. Okay, so when you have text, you tag the word. I want to tag it as an H1. It's huge. The size is huge. It's boldface, and it's the letter S. Okay, so that creates that big boldface S, which was tagged as an H1 section. And similarly, there's another one for the W. Okay, so there's another one here for the W, and one for the O, and one for the T. Okay. Other nodes can set up hyper targets, and again, they can be tagged words, and that, right, so you need something in there to be the target, and that's what the tag word does. Okay. And so on, and so all the way through. When we look at this from the point of view of, standards, right? The claim is that it's built for PDFA 3A, although it doesn't need the special features of Part 3, okay, and for PDF UA, and one can run the validator and check that. Okay, so it's a PDF UA file. Run the validator for pdfa-3a, pdfa-3a, verify compliance, and it verifies. Okay. Okay, and then I suppose we could also, well, the other tests that one can do is to do the accessibility test, accessibility check, and start checking. And okay, it says to issues logical reading order needs manual check. Well, for this one, that's a bit strange. What is the logical reading order? Right? However, when we saw the tagging and how the tagging was structured, well, okay, we had to choose an order for the 4 different objects, so that, or 4 different sections of the object. So going with S, W, O, and T in that order seems the natural thing to do. And then, of course, there's a bit of difficulty with the 4 things around the outside. But apart from that, if you're satisfied with that, well, then you do your manual check and that's it. Color contrast, again, needs manual check. Well, I think the use of the colors is pretty clear. I don't think there's going to be any difficulties for color, for people with color disabilities. So again, that check is very easy to do manually. Have a look and say, yes, okay, that looks fine. Okay. So basically, all of the standards are satisfied, and all the tests that one can do automatically to check standards, they're all satisfied. Okay. So that's one example. The other example. Okay. So let's do another example here. Okay, so this is another one that Tom sent me, and in fact there was 2 pages in this, so we'll set up the second page, and we've got this nice diagram being used to explain how Winch works. By rotating the wheel, you're lifting the weight. Okay, and so if we go to that one, we can bring it down. And let's have a look at the tagging. Okay, so you can see that all the text is tagged, and then you've also got graphic elements. Okay, and not only is it tagged, it's tagged in such a way that you can actually explain what that part of the diagram is all about. Okay, so lifting, this little group involves the initial position of the mass, the final position of the mass, and how much the elevation was. Okay, the top part of it here is about the wheel and what the wheel radius is, where the wheel center is, the point at which you're attached, the attachment happens, and so where it is the beginning and then after rotation. Okay, and how much we rotated by. Okay, similarly for lowering, so on the second page, the same kind of thing can all happen. Okay, so you can see what's going on here. We're making, fully tagged documents, as well as using all the nice power of LaTeX to produce really neat aesthetic diagrams. You can capture if you like, the semantics of the diagram, and what each piece means, and then present that in a way such that it can be extracted. It can actually be extracted, and these words can be found even though they don't appear in the document itself. Okay, so I thought when he gave me these examples, I thought, wow, this is a really neat kind of thing that I've never seen anyone do before, but I think we can do it. And it's kind of along the lines of what Adobe have said that they're trying to do with PDF. They're trying to make PDF to be usable more like how people use HTML for tag documents, and it's okay. We've done it for journal articles. We've done it as research reports, as Tom was describing, and here you can do it for other kinds of documents as well, and diagrams of a technical nature. Okay. So that's really all I wanted to add to Tom's talk. right? The examples came from him, so that was a natural place to put them in. And again, it's work that I've done. I don't think Tom has even seen this this version of this particular document yet, but you can see how useful it can be. Okay, so I'm going to stop that share, and maybe we can have a look if there are any questions on this to either Tom or myself. So yeah. So if there are any questions, fire away. No questions?
Patrick has a question.
Patrick has a question. Okay. Can we open a, well, can we let him ask it in person? Okay, so this is in the chat. So this, the device of a begin foo to end foo added rather like adding div class equals foo end div in an HTML file. Yeah, sure. It's kind of like that. If that's the way to think of it. You're just putting in an environment which doesn't have to do anything. It doesn't have to provide any extra content. It doesn't have to provide any styles that you're going to attach to other contents. But it does create the tag. It allows you to create a tag, which then allows you to say, well, everything that's within that environment is a child of that tag. And so you can access the whole tag in one go. Okay. So I don't know what Chris's comment here is. Add cyclic structures to the ubiquitous trees on the web. I'm not quite sure what Chris means by that. But,
that diagram, you had a cyclic structure.
Yes,
yeah?
yes, yes. Okay.
You use a mathematician there. Okay. But the...
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so what, wait on, where's Chris? Can we unmute you? I'm trying to unmute you. Yeah, there you go. You're unmuted now. So, are you in communication now? Well, there seems to be one more question.
Yes, I'm here, but Patrick seems to be having trouble.
Uh-huh. Well, okay. So there was a question in the Q&A from Henri Menke saying that the tagging is not very TXI. Instead of using custom environment, you should use TXI scopes and the existing at begin and end scope hooks. Well, that's quite possibly true. Not all that familiar or experienced with using TXI, but the point I discovered that you can put in this extra environment. It doesn't actually cause any harm, and it just hooks into the same way that my coding for tpdf already picks up environments. So it was a very, very convenient way to get that kind of tagging working. The extra scope hooks that you're talking about, sure, we'll have a look and see how we can make use of them, but I don't see that it needs them. Yeah, I don't think we need more hooks. It says if you need more hooks, you're happy to provide them. I don't know that we do need more hooks, but sure, I mean, it's only early days for this kind of thing, so if it turns out that we do need more hooks, then certainly, and if you're happy to provide, that's great. I'll have a look at it. But it is, early days, and we do what we can with what we have first, and then when we find we need more, then we know where to turn. So thanks very much.
Patrick is on the line right now.
Well, what
Hello,
sort of,
Patrick.
hi Ross, great,
Yeah.
very interesting. What sort of things can actually be hung on inside the PDF file? Apparently you can put in hyperlinks and so on. You can do something in, you said with tooltips, but what else can you invoke? What other programming can be provoked by
Okay. Well,
by
it's
labels?
yeah. I mean, it's a matter of fitting in with the PDF standards and what's defined in PDF itself, and how to right. So those labels on the tags are well when you create a structure tag, it's a very large kind of data structure. There's at least 10 different things or 10 different classes of things that can be added to tags. They need to have a name for the tag. Okay, they need to have you need to have a unique you're ending up constructing a PDF object, and you may want to be able to access that object in different ways, so you need to have a unique name for that object, which is normally constructed using some prefix and a number, but you also want to have a user readable name. And what the ones that you were seeing in the tag window on the left when I was doing it, the one describing what each of the pieces of that winch diagram were all about, they're using the human readable title for that structure, rather than the machine readable unique name. And then of course, they have to fit into they have to fit into the tree structure, so that every structure node has a parent, and then it can have children. So all the things that come under it are going to be its children. You can also attach attributes, and you can attach classes, just like you can in HTML, right?
Right.
And the thing is,
we're
sorry.
still in, we're still in rooted, labeled, planar trees.
Yeah. Okay. So rooted, yes. There's a structured tree root, yes. Planar, yes. I think planar is correct.
If you order them, they're planar.
Yes. 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 There's certainly very much done that, but there's more. Okay. So it's more than that. Within a PDF, it's more than that, because you've got a second tree structure, which is pages and what's on a page.
Yeah.
All right. So the structure can have a piece of structure can have children on multiple pages, but each page has to know which structure exists on that page and what content is attached to it. So in a talk I gave several years back, Chris Rowley said, it's a double tree or something like that, which is kind of correct. Mathematically, it's a double tree structure in which the structure from one tree and structure from the other tree have to dovetail together, and you need to add, plus there's extra indexing as well. So there's a whole stack of indexes as well. It's a very, TpdF is a very complicated structure, much more complicated than the PDFs that are made in a non-tagged way by tech software traditionally. Okay, so there is a lot more work going on, and that's part of the reason why it's taken so long to get to the stage that we're at. I mean, I've been working at it for multiple years now.
It's clearly a matter of wonderful complexity, and it's amazing what you managed to get it to do.
Sorry, you're very faint there, Patrick. You'd have to speak up. And I've got rain coming down on the roof behind me, so.
It worries me that the HTML group with their DOM and their shadow DOM,
Yeah.
things that are trying to imitate these sort of complex structures and are making things very complicated.
Uh-huh. Okay. Um, okay. I feel that they've done a really good job with Tag PDF. Right? I really like the way, what it can do. And I mean, I was starting to say that you can also add attributes and class names to all the structures, and that's part of what makes that export to XML work really well, right? It used to be that I hadn't realized how to do that for hyperlinks, and when you export it to XML, the hyperlinks wouldn't work because they didn't have the information. And then I realized how you have to put in the extra attributes, and you have to make sure that you're specifying the XML. You need the XML namespace declarations. You need all of that. All of that kind of stuff is available for Tag PDF. And what that means is that when you do an export to XML, it'll use you can actually say what is the author or what is the owner of these attributes. So the concept is the owner of the attribute. So when you export to XML, if you've specified that the owner of the attribute is XML, then those attributes will be used. But you could specify a different set of attributes for when you're going to export into HTML, and a different set of attributes if you're going to export into a Word document, all this kind of thing. So all these options are in fact available. And so you can understand why they call it a universal accessibility, because it's universal in the sense that you can project out of that document into all kinds of other document formats, and you can put the information in there that you want to come out when you do such a projection. So it really is like the mathematical algebraic concept of a universal object.
Yes.
Okay.
When you illustrate your PDF discussion with some sort of commutative diagram, I think that will be great.
Yeah, well, yes, I mean, not sure how I managed that, but it's certainly. So the idea is that you pack as much as you can in such a way that you've got to think of how many ways you want it to come out, and you can adapt to each of those ways that you want it to come out. So there's a kind of universality in there in some sense, and I'm sure that's why they chose that name, or something to do with how they chose that name. But you can even put in multiple languages, right? Right. So each of the, well, I suppose you can do that in PDFs anyway. You can put in multiple languages, but if you do that, then, well, so now you're actually putting in the content in multiple different ways, and specifying that here is the English version, here's the French version, here's the Greek version, here's the Italian version, here's the Vietnamese version, here's the Indian version, or whatever. So all the different languages, that possibility exists as well.
Remarkable what you can do. Very nice.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we've handled all of the. Yeah. Okay. So we dismiss that. I think we've handled all of the Q&A, and if there's anything else there.
Actually, about the question of rigor.
Yeah.
I mean.
Okay.
Your pre-flight checks check a great number of things, and it's all to the good if something complies with a demanding standard.
That's
One of the problems within the W3C seems to have been that people had trouble with XML. It was too demanding. The arrangement was
yes. Okay. Right. Look. Okay. Somebody. Let me make a comment here. I look back at one of the chats. Somebody said, where is it? When I made the comment that you needed to be able to use Acrobat Pro, they made the comment that there are some, here it is, there are also free Preflight tools like VeraPDF and pdfbox.apache.org, which should cover almost everything that Adobe Acrobat Pro offers. Yeah, I'm sorry if Henry is still around. I'm going to say, look, I'm sorry, that just isn't true. Those tools may well do the verification side, which are tests that I showed you, but it doesn't. But those things do not give you the way to go into the structure and find out. You know, if something's wrong, how do you find out what's wrong? Right? Verification can tell you, yes, it's right. No, it's not right. If it's not right, you want to know, well, okay, what do we do? How are we going to fix this? What is really wrong? You need to be able to examine every detail of how that PDF has been structured to be able to find certain kinds of errors. And Acrobat Pro gives you that. I don't believe these other tools do enough of that. Okay, so you know, I mean, I may be wrong, and it would be great if there were free tools that could do everything that Acrobat Pro does. That would be wonderful. But then people use them, and they have to learn how to use them, and Acrobat gives you so much more. I mean, you know, I've had Acrobat Pro on my laptops for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, and I'm continually finding new, very useful ways to use some of the features that Acrobat provides. I still create the documents using TeX software, but I use Acrobat to check everything and to find mistakes. All right, and some of that font stuff that I showed for my first talk, it was, if Acrobat hadn't told me there were problems, I would never have even bothered to look further and find what those problems were. Right? I got into that by examining fonts that other people were using in different kinds of documents. Acrobat would say that there's something not right here, so I'd go in and have a look and examine the detailed structure in the font itself. You know, and try and see if we can find out what's wrong. But even then, there are things that you can't do even with Acrobat. There are mistakes you can make in building your TeX document, building the PDF using TeX software. You can make a mistake which totally disrupts the parsing in the PDF, and Acrobat throws up its hands and says, "I don't know what's wrong." And so then you have to actually open up the PDF in a text editor and have a look through and see, well, I was working in this kind of area, I was trying to change something here, what have I done? And you find that there's some broken syntax because you were using text special commands where there's no way of telling whether what you're using those commands for is going to create something sensible. You have to have that knowledge yourself to be able to work with that, and then discover that error that you've made and slap yourself and say, oh, how did I make an error like that? And you go back, fix it up in your tech code, and then everything works again. Everything then does what it was supposed to do, because you just simply forgot to, you know, well, it's like if you're working in XML, you forgot to escape a special character, and it ends up having the wrong meaning, right? So you may have failed to expand a tech macro into what its argument is meant to be, and it's gone in as the name of the macro or something like that. It's complete with backslash, and now you're totally stuffing up the syntax of the PDF. It's the kind of mistakes that you make. That can be made, and if you don't have the experience to be able to handle it, you're not going to be able to know that that's what you've done, because this is all happening in a part of the PDF that most PDF viewers don't even look at. If they only look at the content and build the picture out of the content, a mistake in the tagging area will just go past unnoticed, and they won't know. And you know, when you process using TechShop or whatever, any of the tech any of the text software machines, whatever you want to call them, you know, they will show you the content, but they're not aware of the structure. They don't know what to do with it. And so that's, you know, it's too easy to make a document that's broken without knowing that you've made that document, that the document is broken. And that's why you have to look at, you know, you have to go into validations. You've got to do this kind of stuff. It has to be part of your workflow, your total standard. It's not just something, oh, this is something we'll do at the end. It's got to be something that you're doing all the time. In order,
you're not apparently in favor of, and I wouldn't be at all in favor of it either, building a PDF interpreter with a quirks mode. I mean, that's exactly the wrong way from my point of view, and that's a problem on the web. But that is the intention, as far as I can see. Yeah, I mean, the mathematicians would say if you've got a tool chain, you should construct interesting invariants which should remain invariant as they pass along the chain and keep testing
we lost
them.
You. 7 new messages. What's going on here? Okay.
Just me telling Patrick stuff.
Ah, okay. Yeah. Okay. Do you really care to use things in the docs? Are probably missing all but far easier to do via LaTeX. Adobe contacted you to help them, eh? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, they did.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Complex. Oops. Okay. Maybe. Right. You get complex but correct PDF if you use a programmable, extendable producer like LaTeX. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's directed directly at Patrick, not at you. I'd like to hear his reaction.
Yeah, and sure, you can put almost anything into PDF. I mean, okay, a few years back I did a document in which I put and this is where pdfA-3 really comes into it. It was a whole lot of mathematics. And for every piece of mathematics, there was an attachment which was the text source of the mathematics, an attachment which was a MathML translation of that text source, or maybe the MathML came first and the text source came later. Well, no, I don't think so. I think it was the other way around, text source and the MathML. And they were put in as associated files. And the idea of associated files is that when you hover your mouse over the appropriate region of text where you've got this indication that there's an associated file available, and that associated file has information in a different format, then what's supposed to happen is that it initializes some internal thing which is say, well, okay, let's show this in the MathML viewer, and show the MathML, or show a MathML rendering of this piece of text, and then that viewer might let you actually do things with it, and may even be able to make changes to that source, and then it'll re-render the new MathML with the changes you made, even though the document itself still has it in the old form, right? And you know, that's an area, that kind of area is one that Adobe seem to be going in, with these associated files which let you, give different views of the same kind of information, and those views would need support software which was either integrated into Acrobat or provided in some other way. Maybe it's linking to something that you already have on the screen. So just like you would in an HTML document, right? If you've got a link to a viewer, it uses the viewer and put and build in the way it builds up the HTML page. But they're wanting PDF to be able to do that kind of thing too. And you know, like if you're running if there was a movie associated to something, then you could click it and start the movie. Well, I mean, we've seen that kind of thing in PDFs over the years, but it's meant to be more than that, and it's meant to, well. So the idea is you can, yeah, that's kind of for doing for presenting, you know, verifiable research information inside the PDF, because not only would you have the information given as a graph, but you might have it in as a spreadsheet, and that spreadsheet could then link to spreadsheet software and let you do something and maybe create a chart out of it or do whatever. So that was the kind of idea for associated files. And I can see that, yeah, I mean, what you really want, of course, is a tech plugin to Adobe, so that you could do a whole new tech typeset version of the information, but something like that.